founder of the Wasatia, moderate Islamic movement of Palestine, and he's the director of the Wasatia Academic Institute. He also served as the founding director of American Studies, the Graduate Institute, Al-Quds University of the University of Jerusalem. Dr. Dajani is the author of many books and articles on politics, economics, and religion, and he led the first Palestinian group of students to visit the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. And this trip led to much controversy, causing him ultimately to lose his job at the university. Professor Dajani and Zina Barakat published a book with Martin Rao, and the co-authors of a book published in Arabic entitled The Holocaust and Human Agony. And Professor Dajani, we were speaking earlier in the last few sessions about how, as I think true intellectuals and scholars, we have to stand up to sort of political pressures and maintain notions of academic freedom and integrity, and you really embody that, so we're really honored that you're here, so thank you. And we also have not yet, soon to be professor, Dr. Rami Aziz, who's a research fellow here at ISGAP. He recently completed his doctorate degree at the La Sapienza University in Rome, and he works on issues of the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe. And I think he's of a young generation of brilliant scholars that are looking at the current challenges of these reactionary social movements and fighting against injustice or against the other and anti-Semitism, and promoting, I would say, democratic values, if you will, in the Arabic world and beyond, in Europe and beyond. So it's really an honor to have you both with us. And Professor Dajani, the floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Would you like me to start with the video now, Professor Dajani?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
One moment.
I think the voice is not there.
So Ira, we don't hear any sound. Maybe if you can restart the video with.
Yeah. 1 second. Better?
Yeah.
Mohammed Dajani, the Institute's Weston Fellow, is a Palestinian professor and peace activist. He was born in 1946 to one of Jerusalem's historic Arab families, one that has been the custodian of King David's tomb on Mount Zion since the 14th century. As a young adult, Dajani was a Palestinian revolutionary and an anti-American activist, but his views began to change when he came to the US as a graduate student.
To me, it was like getting out of the cave, because here I became exposed to different ideas, to democracy in practice, in culture, and it was an eye-opener, and it was a very unique experience.
Inspired by American values, Dajani went on to create the first American Studies department in the Arab world at Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, where he taught a more balanced view of the United States. He also founded a non-political movement called Wasatia, which means middle ground. Wasatia promotes tolerance and moderation and teaches how those values are reflected in Islam. Both his work with Wasatia and his teaching of American studies reflect Dajani's belief in the importance of empathy for reaching reconciliation. Last year, he bravely took a group of Palestinian students to the Auschwitz death camp in Poland.
To me, it was very important because I thought that this topic is a taboo, and people did not want to talk about it, did not want to learn about it, because there is this misconception that it is a Zionist narrative. I felt that it is very important that we cannot remain ignorant about this, and that we should teach our students what really happened and try to focus on this topic from the human perspective.
He was forced to resign after a months-long campaign of death threats, campus riots, and intimidation. Dajani is now working in the United States to pursue his dream of a moderate Middle East.
Actually, I got introduced to the Institute when I met Dr. Robert Sutloff, and we developed a friendly relationship. And then this helped me see the work he is doing. And I thought what he did regarding the Holocaust and how he studied what Muslims contributed during the Holocaust. And so I thought that's exactly what we are doing, trying to build bridges between communities. And so we co-authored together an article that was titled, "Why Should Palestinians Learn About the Holocaust?" During my stay here, I was shocked to find how much people here learn, what a cultural and enriching environment it is. Also the colleagues around who have so much knowledge and so much experience and are contributing to all this good work. In that sense, I was also very impressed by the fact that I, as a Palestinian, is part of it, as well as many others who have come before me. I think that it is very important. This is, I think, part what we promote in Wasatia, to be able to know the other and to be able to understand the other and to learn about the other.
At a time of unprecedented violence and extremism in the Middle East, Dajani is a voice of moderation.
And trying to fight extremism, political force might work on the short run, but on the long term, it is ideology which is important. And that's why I believe that we need to promote moderation in order to have an ideology that will fight the extremist ideology.
So welcome, Professor Dajani. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Would I start now?
Yes, please. Please.
Thank you. What I would like to do is to first tackle the definition of anti-Semitism, particularly to show Arab perspectives regarding that, and then to discuss some of the influences on the Arab mind regarding anti-Semitism and issues related to the Holocaust, and then how to combat that. Now, when we used to use the traditional term of anti-Semitism in the Arab world, people would say anti-Semitism, that means anti-Semite. We are anti-Semite, and as a result, we cannot be.
Professor Dajani, you just need to unmute yourself. Nope, you had it. Yep, there you go.
So when I look at the Arab world, I see a world that needs to have its mind open. That's why I like James Dewar's idea that minds are like parachute, they only function when they are open. So here, the problem is we have the Arab mind is caged, and our work, whether in education and others, is to free this the Arab mind. So here, this is where we need to look at how we deal with anti-Semitism, how we deal with the Holocaust, how we deal with issues which are taboo in the Arab world. Here, anti-Semitism, with regard to its traditional definition of being hatred for a Jew or a group of Jew on basis of ethnicity, on religion, has been enlarged to include also anti-Zionism and anti-Israel. Here, the Arabs will have a problem, because when you are talking about anti-Israel or anti-Zionism, the question is in the mind of the reader, what do we, does criticizing Israel make me anti-Semitic? If I'm criticizing Israeli policies regarding the occupation, regarding repression, regarding things related to policies that people might find problematic, then does that make me anti-Semitic? Also, if I would compare Jewish Israeli army practices to Nazi practices, and for instance, if I put a picture on the website showing a comparison between an Israeli soldier holding on to a young boy to imprison him, or a young Jewish boy with a star on his chest, and make that comparison, and that's where it is so difficult to draw the line regarding this issue. That's where I, for instance, take issue with also Sharansky's 3Ds. I agree with the first part, demonization and delegitimization, to consider them as anti-Semitic. But if we are talking about the third one, which is when Israel is held to a double standard. If Israel is believes itself to be comparative to Saudi Arabia or to others, it's a different story. But when Israel says, I'm the democracy in the Middle East, I'm a democratic state, and then it says that if there is repression in Saudi Arabia, and you ignore that, and you look at repression in Israel regarding the occupation, then it is double standard. Here, I have a problem with that, as other Arabs, because Israel should be held to moral values and not to what others are doing. If there are other, if there is no democracy in the Arab world, and you are saying you are looking at Israel and trying to criticize Israel in that standard, Israel cannot say, I'm a democracy, and then at the same time, but if I don't practice democracy, it is because the other side is not practicing democracy. So the problem is with the last part of that 3Ds, in the sense that Israel should be held to its own values, and as a result, when it is being criticized that there are radical issues, or Israel is practicing non-democratic standard regarding the Palestinians. For instance, it is said that if you deny the presence of Israel, then it is anti-Semitic. But how about if you are denying the presence of the Palestinians, of the Palestinian state? Does that make it also anti-Palestinian? So here, that's where it is, when you are talking within the context of the Arab world and dealing with anti-Semitism within the Arab world, you have different framework, you have a different standard, and you have to take that into account. And and so it is not the term anti-Semitism in the US, in Europe, is not the same as it is in the Arab world. And that's the problem. Because in the Arab world, if I'm being said that it's anti-Semitic, it's not a big deal. It's not even an insult. They don't think of it because they mix anti-Semitism with anti-Israel and anti-Israel with pro-Palestinian. And so in this way, if you are anti-Semitic, then it is as if you are pro-Palestinian. And that's why to them, it's not negative to tell them that. And also because of ignorance. People don't know what is anti-Semitic and what does it refer to, what does it mean, what does it imply. And as a result, here you have to have education in order to promote what is anti-Semitism, to teach them about that. Same thing with Holocaust. And for instance, you will tend to find that there are a lot of Holocaust deniers who are popular heroes in the Arab world, and that's related more to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And so that's where I think that when we are dealing with the Arab world and we are dealing with the Islamic world, we have to be very careful about how we use that terms, because if you are saying that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic, then you are losing your audience. You are losing the people, because people would say, look at Israel, what's doing. And there is a positive side to Israel and there is a negative side. So basically, if you mix both of them, because in Israel, there are the extremists and there are the moderates. And if you mix them like what BDS does, then you fall into the same mistake BDS is doing, because BDS is not distinguishing between those who are pro-peace and those who are anti-peace, those who are pro-human rights and those who do not care about human rights. And so that's the same problem that we are having with this definition of anti-Semitism. When it is anti-Judaism, it is no problem. But when it is anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, we have to be careful that when it is anti-Israel, bashing Israeli occupation policies is not considered in the Arab world, and for pro-Palestinian cause, it's not considered anti-Semitism. So getting from there, I'd like to now move on to what has influenced the Arabs regarding anti-Semitism. And it's very important to notice that the Arabs have no qualm with there are Jews who say that it is from the time of Islam there has been anti-Jewish tendencies within the Muslim world, and they refer to the Quran. And I don't agree with that. I don't believe that the Quran is anti-Semitic or that it has anti-Jewish. In this sense, it criticizes, and this is where the problem, that people tend to generalize. They tend to say that when the Quran talks about Jews, as if it talks about all Jews, which is not true. It makes a distinction that some of them, or it says many of them, or so when it criticizes, it doesn't criticize Judaism. It criticizes practices of Jews that has also been criticized by Jews themselves. And as a result, this is where the difference. Now, I'd like to just, regarding European influence, I'd like to show quickly some of the books that has affected, or the literature that has affected the Arabs. And I will go through them quickly. This is Martin Luther's book, Jews and Their Lives, and the hypocrisy of Jews. So this has been translated to Arab, and because of the status of Martin Luther, then that left much impact on particularly Christians, but also Muslims. Also, Henry Ford's book has been translated, The International Jew, and also this has been reprinted even recently. And so it is very anti-Semitic, and it does influence the Arab mind. Also, the most important book that has so much influence is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is popular. And I want to show just how many different reprints and issues has been published throughout the Arab world. And this is, for instance, this is, these are different versions of the protocols by different publishers and different translators. And look at this anti-Semitic photo or caricature on the Protocols of Elders of Zion, where the face is very ugly, and then there is a skull. And so it is very anti-Semitic, yet it is, nobody is saying no to it, or nobody is protesting against it. This is also, and these are, look at this one here, where the Al-Khatar al-Yahudi, Protocolat, the Jewish danger, Protocols of Elders of Zion, and it's more like an octopus there, the photo. And these are different versions of the Elders of Zion, the books of the Elders of Zion. And so it is all spread throughout the Arab world. And that's why people are seeing it as if it is an intellectual book, or they don't see it as an anti-Semitic book, that it is not true, that it is being just promoting anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. So this is a snake through the Star of David. And so the title there is Protocols of Elders of Zion. This is an Egyptian publisher. Another book that is very problematic is the reprints of the Mein Kampf of Kifahi for Adolf Hitler. It is amazing how many reprints are there in modern times. And so you will tend to find, and these are different reprints for the book. So here, these are, if you, in combating anti-Semitism, you have to work with the culture. There, you are fighting against all these odds, against all this literature that's being spread within the Arab world. And even this book, it says, Tabriyat Hitler min al-Holocaust. And this is that Hitler was not that was not responsible for the Holocaust. It's a whole book about that. And so, or the other face of Hitler. And so, and this influences the young people, because people who read this book, then they can make a demonstration saying God bless Hitler. And in this way, also the books that are being anti-Semitic are being translated to Arabic and has a lot of circulation. This is William Carr's book, Al-Yahud Wara'ul Jarima. Jews are behind every crime. And look at the anti-Semitic picture there. But nobody notices that this is an anti-Semitic picture with the nose and with the eyes and with the looks and with the hands, with every body gesture there. And so people are in this way being. Also, Noam Chomsky's books are very popular, and they are viewed as being intellectual, and at the same time, for instance, his book about the Holocaust is very popular. It has been reprinted in different publications, and as a result, it does influence. Also, here we also have the Holocaust issue, also how it is that deniers of the Holocaust are heroes, are people who are viewed positively, not negatively. And this is also part of the hidden anti-Semitism, because they take their books and they translate them and they make them as if they are genuine, well-researched, and as a result, it's part of that conflict. Here, and this is the cultural background. Also, the Arab-Israeli conflict is part of this, has much influence on the Arab feeling of anti-Semitism. And so they cross from anti-Semitism to anti-Judaism. We will tend to find that, for instance, Mahmoud Abbas's book, The Other Face, the secret relations between Nazism and Zionism is circulating. Him being the president of the PA makes it more popular or more acceptable or more readable, though he himself has distanced himself from that book and from his, it is the dissertation that he had done in Moscow in the Soviet Union. And at that time, anti-Semitism in the Soviet Academy was very well. And so as a student doing his PhD, I believe he was driven into that paradigm of anti-Semitism. So here also the tendency of writers is to write books which are anti-Semitic regarding the Holocaust. There is much more books on Holocaust denial and Holocaust criticism, much more than any other topic. And and also, this is a book that claims that it is Holocaust denial, or that the Holocaust lie, or that the fabrication of the Holocaust. So these are books that are being popular. Also, this is here, and this book says الأكذوبة الكبرى, حرق 6 ملايين يهودي في أفران الغاز, the biggest lie to burn 6 million Jews in the gas chambers. So here, and this is the type of books that are being published regarding the Holocaust. So when you are talking about Holocaust education, and then here, this Ayman Sharaf has written this book, it's called The Reverse Holocaust, How Jews Killed 80,000 Germans and Tortured 3 million others. So when you come and talk about Holocaust education, in a culture that has these books popular, sold cheaply in the street, and circulating very well, reprinted differently, then it is the mindset is being influenced by all this literature. And this is also part of it, part of the problem we face. Now also the education, part of the anti-Semitism, a serious part of anti-Semitism is found in education, because the education is anti-Judaism and anti-Jewish. And as a result, the problem is many of the textbooks talk about national education, which means anti-Jewish education. And so there are lots of stories, lots of pictures, lots of images that are very anti-Semitic, yet it's not being understood that it is anti-Semitic. It is being understood as if it is national education. And this is, they will tell you there is no peace. That's why we don't go for peace education. But we are now on, we are at the threat of losing Palestinian identity. So we have to stress national identity. How to do that? By having anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, anti-Zionism education. So that's where you will tend to find that. Also, radical Islam. You will tend to find that radical Islam is playing a major role in having in teaching anti-Jewish, and at the same time, anti-Jewish is becoming anti-Semitic. Even, and for instance, here in the Quran, they try to put down there, and this is a surah from the Quran, down there, they are talking that this is Al-Fatiha surah, and they are talking about Jews as Al-Maghdub alayhim, God is angry with them, and the Christians are lost. So the religion is being interpreted totally as if it is anti-Jewish, and this is also part of the anti-Semitism. So basically, what we are trying to how we combat that is, for instance, this text from the Hadith, in which it talks about Judgment Day, that Muslims will kill Jews and a Jew will hang on the tree. What we do is try to find that as Wasatia regarding religion, trying to fight that in the sense of trying to teach Islam as a moderate Islam, and to challenge these hadith. And for instance, look at this picture. Look at the picture of the Jew hiding behind the tree, and the tree calling for the Muslim to kill him, and which is nonsense, very anti-Semitic. Yet it is unfortunate that this is how Islam is taught. Also with the media, depicting Jews as evil monsters, and or they are preventing people from knowing the truth. So films like The Grey Zone, Chandler's List is banned from being shown in movies. And so basically, that's why we believe in trying to reach empathy in order to combat anti-Semitism, and in order to combat Holocaust. So and try to see, try to teach Islam from a positive view, and to take hadith which is positive, like this one, for instance, a funeral procession, to promote the quotes that promote pro-Jewish attitude, and try to fight against those quotes which are anti-Jewish, and because they are not related to the Quran, and as a result, try to do that. So in that sense, also it's useful to show in dealing with the Holocaust and teaching about the Holocaust and the Holocaust education, to show that also Muslims did contribute to saving Jews during the Holocaust, although there were some who did not, or were not doing that. But there were people like Robert Satloff found out that there were, among the righteous, there were Arabs and Muslims. And so in this way, it built bridges between Judaism and Islam when you show something like that. And that's why we do that. We try to do that. Also, we try to promote books like this one, which is Ukdhuba Ta'b al-Maut, A Lie That Defies Death, which is about to make workshops and to try to promote these books. Also, stories like Anne Frank's story, and books that have been written from a positive side. Also, we have written our own book regarding the Holocaust, which documents with pictures and the agony and the suffering of Jews during the Holocaust. So it is a battle that needs to be fought, and it's a voice that needs to be heard. And that's why, although it is very difficult now to do this in battle, stop there in order, because the time is out. And in this way, I'll be more than glad to take questions.
So Professor Dajani, thank you very much for your very important presentation, important at many levels. So what I would like to do is allow Rami to make a brief presentation, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Thank you, Professor Dajani. Rami, the floor is yours.
You'll just need to unmute, Rami.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Dajani. Thanks, Charles, for having me. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to be with this group of wonderful scholar and researcher and junior student. So today, Ira, could you please play my presentation?
Sure. 1 moment.
Today, I'm going to present about the topic entitled The Islamist and the Contemporary Forms of Anti-Semitism between the quotation Anti-Zionism and Anti-Israel. Ira, could you please, the next. So I have introduction. I'd like to start with talking about the dilemma of anti-Semitism. Is considered, you can hear me? Everything is okay?
Rami, you froze for about 10 seconds.
Okay, I'm so sorry for that. Okay. I said that I'm going today to present about the topic entitled the Islamists and the Contemporary Forms of Anti-Semitism, Anti-Zionism and Anti-Israel. Today we're going to examine the issue of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel. Is anti-Zionism and anti-Israel is a part of anti-Semitism inside the political Islam narrative or no? To get answer for this question, we're going to examine the most prominent Islamist ideologists, starting from Hassan al-Banna, passing with Sayyid Qutb until Yusuf al-Qaradawi. So at the beginning, I'd like to start with the introduction and say the dilemma of anti-Semitism is one of the greatest challenges that humanity continues to face. It's an ever-growing dilemma. Despite all the destructive effects that have resulted from it, which claimed the lives of millions of innocent Jews in the last century in the Holocaust, despite all of this, the anti-Semitism still exists today. It's increasing at alarming rates in the world. Next, please. And we should admit it at the beginning that the essence of anti-Semitism is anti-Judaism, because anti-Judaism Judaism came first before. If we're talking about anti-Semitism, like the Arab people loving to say, we are Egyptian, we are Semitic, but the only people are facing hatred based on the relationship with Semitic gender is Jewish people. So the essence of anti-Semitism is anti-Judaism. So the perpetrators of the crime of anti-Semitism use many different slogans, including anti-Zionism, You can hear me? Everything is okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, because I can't see, I only see the picture. So I'm talking here about the perpetrators of the crime of anti-Semitism use the different slogans, including anti-Zionism and anti-Israel, to escape from punishment. So here comes the question: is there any difference between anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and anti-Israel, or these terms are using as backdoors by these perpetrators to commit the crime anti-Semitism with impunity? Next, please. In this context, we will review the subject of ideology of political Islam and the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and the anti-Israel by reviewing the views of the number of the political Islam main ideologists whose ideas formed the main principles of the political Islam/jihadi movement in its various groups, from the Muslim Brothers, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah to ISIS. Next, please. First one, we will start with the godfather. I called him the godfather of the political Islam current in the contemporary age is Hassan al-Banna. So next, please. At the beginning, I'd like to give an idea about the background of Hassan al-Banna, his family, whether he grew up in it, to can understand his mentality and the circumstances around him. So Hassan al-Banna was born in a religious family that tended to hurt him. His father worked in the profession of repairing repairing watches. In addition, he had some religious duties in the village where he lived. He also had some religious writings, including those related to the arrangement of hadith and the explanation of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the founder of the fiqh school known as Hanbali, which is one of the schools that adopted the more radical interpretation in Islam. The next, please. Ibn Hanbal ideas had a great impact on Ibn Taymiyyah, another faqih jurisprudence, who is more radical than his teacher Ibn Hanbal. Also, his ideas are still source of inspiration of all groups of Islamic extremism and terrorism to this day. Ibn Taymiyyah ideas had an impact on Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism in the Arabian Peninsula, which is one of the major Salafist schools in Saudi Arabia and the world as well. Ibn Abdul Wahhab is the most prominent of those who explained and developed Ibn Taymiyyah's ideas. That is why he can be described as the extension of Ibn Taymiyyah. Next, please. This radical environment has affected al-Banna's life and made him a person who believes and he is responsible on reforming the Muslim community or the Muslim Ummah, Muslim nation, and even the whole Muslim Ummah and the nation by returning it to the Salafi radical Islamic approach that represents the right path to Islam from his point of view, especially after the collapse of the Islamic Caliphate in 1924. Next, please. In order to achieve that goal, and the dream, if you can say, al-Banna and a group of 6 people in 1928 in the city of Ismailia, 100 kilometers east of Cairo. Ismailia was one of the Suez Canal cities located in Egypt, by the way. So it was mainly prohibited by British and foreigner. For this reason, Muslim Brotherhood started as anti-West movement. Founded a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. Their slogan is Allah is our objective, the Prophet is our leader, Quran is our constitution/law, Jihad is our way, and this for the sake of Allah is our highest hope. We can say the slogan of the Muslim Brotherhood, it's 2 intersection thought, and above is the Quran as a constitution, and here is the same slogan I just read it, and here is the Ikhwan al-Muslimun above. The next, please. Despite the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egyptian society after its establishment, but faced a large number of obstacles from the government and the main political parties in Egypt at that time, because they considered the MP or Muslim Brotherhood a real big threat on them, because the MP used the religion as a gateway to political action to compete with the old political parties in the political arena in Egypt at that time. So in the beginning, al-Banna and his colleagues did not succeed in attracting any of intellectual or member of the prestigious classes to the Muslim Brotherhood. So al-Banna's followers were the marginalized from the lowest social classes and uneducated. Next, please. So the first point I'd like to talk about is how al-Banna promoted the Muslim Brotherhood among the Muslim communities, not only in Egypt, but even around the world. Now the Muslim Brotherhood existing in around 80 countries, hundreds of thousands of people are members of the Muslim Brotherhood. They have been started by Palestinian issue. James Horsteen, the famous British historian and Orientalist who spent a long period of his life in Egypt to observe the establishment and activities of the Muslim Brotherhood, in his famous book, The Religious and Political Trends in Modern Egypt, he argues that the rise of clashes in Palestine in the 30s represented an excellent opportunity for al-Banna and the Muslim Brotherhood to take over the scene and spread themselves as a rival force, not only in Egypt, but also in other Arab and Islamic countries. How they did that? Could you please move next? The real beginning to achieve that goal was the meeting between al-Banna and Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who had a close connection with Nazis and Hitler personally, who was the Nazi agent in both the Islamic and Arab worlds. Al-Husseini saw in al-Banna and the Muslim Brotherhood the force that can be relied upon for the implementation of his plans and Nazi plans to exterminate of the Jews. Exterminate of the Jews, this term used by the British Orientalist and historian James Dunn, not me. So please move forward. In exchange for the Nazis and the fascist help in preventing the Jews from reestablishing their national home, Israel, with promises of help in establishing the Islamic Caliphate, Islamic State, that Al-Husseini and the Brotherhood had dreamed of since the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate in Turkey in 1924, and which they accused the Jews of being behind of its fall. Could you please move forward? Al-Banna, in one of his statements, confirms that, as he said in one of it, as long as one Jew is fighting in Palestine, the mission of the Muslim Brotherhood will not end. As soon as the cooperation between Al-Husseini and the Brotherhood began, the Brotherhood began to wage horrific campaigns against the Jews to clarify their dangers to the Muslims and the Islamic nation or Islamic Ummah. This confirms that the Mufti's success in recruiting the Muslim Brotherhood for Hitler and the Nazis. On the other hand, Mufti helped Al-Banna to reach the prestigious social and political circles after he was a leader of the marginalized and lower classes. Move forward, please. Number three, the cases here I'd like to talk about the escalation. Now, after we had a Muslim Brotherhood as the first political Islam group in the contemporary age, Mufti Amin al-Husseini had succeeded to recruit Hassan al-Banna to Nazi scheme, and Hassan al-Banna exploiting that to spread his influence inside Egyptian and Arab and Muslim society. After that, the second phase I can say is the escalation. After the situation stabilized for the Muslim Brotherhood and its leader Hassan al-Banna, after receiving the support and assistance of the Nazi through Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Brotherhood and their followers began a systematic program, more violence and incitement than before. They started targeting Jews under the various name and the pretext. One under the pretext of Zionism. We are targeting Zionist people. We are targeting Jewish people because Jewish people are the people of the book. Because for until us they came from the same source and the Abrahamic religion. So we are targeting the Zionists. And once under the pretext of Israeli. Somebody maybe ask me, how Israeli in 30s of last century, Israel doesn't establishment yet. But in spite of that, but Hassan al-Banna used to call the Jewish community in Egypt in the 30s of last century Israelis, and it was as follows. Please. In their memories, the Muslim Brotherhood members mentioned that the Palestinian cause was not a matter to the Egyptians at the beginning, to the extent that made them say that the Egyptian even did not know where Palestinian was located, and they were unaware of what was happening there. Therefore, al-Banna began sending the Brotherhood's youth to the mosques to incite against the Jews. Please. Al-Banna used to say that what is happening in Palestine is not just a major war, and that the enemy is not only Zionist criminal gangs. It's a great battle that embodies the struggle between the forces of evil, disbelieved / kuffar, and injustice in reference to the Jewish Zionists, and the forces of goodnessness in reference to the Muslims, especially the MP, because regardless, we have a Muslim nation, we have a Muslim everywhere, but the Muslim Brotherhood considers themselves as the only right Muslim people inside the Muslims themselves. So sometimes they classify the other Muslim people calling for moderation or for moderate interpretation for some phrases in Quran towards others like Christian or Jews as un-Muslim, unfortunately. Okay, we can move forward, please. Consequently, al-Banna and the Brotherhood began to persecute the Jews in Egypt, who was described by al-Banna as Israeli. whom the majority of them worked in the fields of trade and the press through the boycott. So the boycott is not a new issue for us. The BDS movement is come originally from political Islam ideology and Nazi ideology. That's the boycott and the call for boycott in Egypt by Hassan al-Banna. It was in conjunction with, at the same time that the Nazi had been started the boycott in the 30s of last century in Germany. So they prepared list of names and addresses of companies and shops owned by Egyptian Jews and distributed them intensively and wrote the penny that you pay them go to the pockets of Jews in Palestine to buy a weapon to kill the Muslims in Palestine. Could you please move forward? Number B is, from my point of view, we see the issues moved to be more critical here, from boycott to destroying. So at the beginning, anti-Semitism started as a call to boycott Jewish people under pretext they are Zionists, they are Israeli. After that, turned to be action of violence. Here we find that the incitement against the Jewish community in Egypt, or as al-Banna calls them, the Israelis, soon developed into a more violent phase. And the Brotherhood began to destroy Jewish property and the companies. The Brotherhood blew up the Eastern advertising company, one of the most famous advertising company in Egypt during the 20th century, by the way, owned by Jewish people, and other major companies that contributed to the Egyptian economy. They are not even care about how these companies benefit the Egyptian economy, the Egyptian families. It's not a matter for them, because the first target for them is to destroy the Jewish people based on anti-Semitic motives. So contributed to the Egyptian economy effectively and benefited thousands of Egyptian families. These companies, including Atzrivoli, Shekaril, and others. And the Muslim Brotherhood did not only blow up Jewish companies and stores, but they had carried out a number of bombings in the Jewish neighborhood known as the Jewish Quarter as well, which has resulted in killed some Jews and destroyed their homes. Please move forward. From the testimony of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders headed by the private secretary of Hassan al-Banna, Mahmoud Assaf, who was close to al-Banna and was his confidant, he said, the reason behind targeting of Jewish companies was to destroy it because the companies that has established by the Brotherhood was not able to compete the Jewish companies. That means the Palestinian cause was not more than a cover for destruction of the Jews in Egypt. Move, please. In the meantime, al-Banna, as a result of funding from the Nazis through Hajj Amin al-Husseini, he started to send Brotherhood youth to fight against the Jews in Palestine. That shows that the jihad against the Jews or Zionists, or as al-Banna called them, Israeli, or Israelis, was divided into several axes. One of them is bombing and murder of Jews in Egypt, and the other against the Jews in Palestine. Could you please move forward? All that was done within the framework of the grand scheme to exterminate the Jews under the auspices of Nazism, and along with promoting anti-Zionism and anti-Israel. al-Banna worked on reviving as a historical religious heritage of anti-Semitism in Islam to justify the process of annihilation of the Jews in modern times, and to achieve the spread of his group as a group is capable of protecting and achieving the interest of the Islamic Ummah nation, unlike the existing rulers. That is how the Brotherhood achieved the popularity and the spread across the Arab and Islamic world using anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, and as integral part of anti-Semitism. The second figure we are going to expose his ideas and about the issue of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, and anti-Zionism is Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb is considered one of the most important figures in the political Islam arena, because he considered until today the godfather of the all jihadi movement around the world.
Rabbi, excuse me, Rabbi, if you could try to wrap up in about 5 minutes, would be good.
5 minutes, it's okay. Okay. At the end, okay, let's move forward. We can understand the situation of Sayyid Qutb from his book. You can jump, please go ahead. Okay, no. Could you please just before? Okay, Sayyid Qutb turned from the United States loaded with the theory of global Zionist conspiracy on the Arabs and Muslims of course. He did not find anyone to be accused of conspiracy against Islam and Arabics against the Jewish people and the Jews. And he always mixed between the Jewish and the Zionism conspiracy on Islam and the Muslim. Move forward, please. In the 50s of last century, Sayyid Qutb wrote one of the important books. It's called Our Battle with the Jews, which included the following basic concept. Move, please. You can move. Okay. He believes in this. We can sum up the major point in this book, the struggle or the battle with the Jews, is the Jews are enemies of God because they are the enemies of Prophet Muhammad and the Islam. And he cited the verses that say you will surely find the most intense of the people of animosity towards the believer to be the Jews and those who associated others with Allah. I wanted to lean until okay, and the Islam is a you can go for it. Okay, and the Jews are the cause of all evils and source of evils. They are not all evil; they are source of evil in the whole world, and they are the ones who created communism, atheism, and those who stand behind those who question Islam, using people with name of Muslim people, but they are not a Muslim as a part of global Zionist conspiracy. And he depend on used protocols of the elders of Zion as evidence to say he is right. Please go ahead. Number C, Jews through the global Zionism use all available means to destroy the Islamic Ummah nation, including money and sex, working to destroy all ethics and spread of pornography and the destruction of morality and the value of family, etc. You can move. The last thing he said that the Jews are fighting Muslims in all parts of earth using their allies, the Crusaders, and the Christian between two quotations, who invented the secularism to separate the religion from the state to overthrow the Islamic Caliphate. And he believes that Islamic Caliphate collapsed according to conspiracy from Zionism and Jewish people. You can move. Well, there is nothing here. We can reach to Yusuf al-Qaradawi. Yeah, Yusuf al-Qaradawi is the last one. Move, please. Yusuf al-Qaradawi is still alive. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, you can move. Move. Okay. Al-Qaradawi has many important opinions about Judaism, Zionism, and Israel, which can be identified by an article published on his website entitled "The Conflict with the Occupiers, Jews, Truth, and Future." He mentioned, he asked by someone about the nature of the conflict between Jews and Arab and Muslim. Is that conflict is a political conflict or ideological conflict? And he mentioned that, number 8, even though the Jews are a people of book, divine religion, and have a doctrine like a Muslim, and that the conflict between them and us is for land, which cannot be compromised because it's a part of the house of Islam, Dar al-Islam. However, we cannot claim that the conflict between the Jews and us has nothing to do with religion, because all the Muslim battles are mixed with religion. So that's enough, we can move. So number B, Qaradawi gave an example showing that the conflict with Israel or Israeli or Jewish or Zionist has said that although Islam allows a Muslim man to marry Jewish women, Muslims are now in a war with the Jews, so Muslim man cannot marry a Jew woman because he will marry an Israeli spy, because all Jews, whatever their location and the country in which they live, are pro-Israel, like the Jewish lobby in the United States, in his opinion. Could you please move? So he believes in some dangerous ideas called the last victory. The last victory that the final battle. For me, it's the final battle or the last victory. It's equal for the final solution of the Nazi ideology to exterminate, annihilation, or the Jewish people. Qaradawi says that that this victory will only be achieved when a Muslim take jihad as a way for them. When a Muslim realizes that the value of jihad, Allah will use all things to help them, even the trees and the stone, using the hadith that Professor Dajani said. I wouldn't like to repeat it again to save the time. Could you please move to the conclusion, please? So the conclusion is, as we saw in the above mentioned examples, Islamic ideology does not differentiate between Judaism, Zionism, and Israel. It's one package. And we saw it from the days of Hassan al-Banna in the 30s, before the reestablishment of the State of Israel again. And he used to call the Jews in Egypt sometimes as Israeli, sometimes as Zionist. Please move forward. And Sayyid Qutb sees the Zionist conspiracy against Islam as a Jewish conspiracy, and calls for a battle against the Jews, not only against the Zionists. And Qaradawi says the Jewish wife as a spy for Israel, even if she doesn't have Israeli passport or doesn't live in Israel. Move forward, please. Therefore, by taking the words of this Islamists as evidence, the anti-Zionism and anti-Israel are anti-Semitism. Therefore, they must be held responsible for these crimes and must not be allowed to escape this responsibility with help of other anti-Semitic currents in the West, such as a far left and the new liberals. And we must not allow the history to repeat itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rami. Thank you for an excellent presentation and overview. And thank you both for very important presentations.
Thank you.
So we have about a half an hour or so for questions and answers. And I would like to start off the first question, take the chair's prerogative. First of all, Rami, I would like to say these issues are not just isolated in the Arab world or in the Middle East. Yosef Qaradawi, for example, helped to start Islamic studies at Oxford University, where I sit. And the impact of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in universities is quite important to understand. That's a whole other issue. So what I was struck by Professor Dajani and Rami, your presentations, is the pervasive issues of anti-Semitism in the political discourse among Palestinians and in the Islamic world. I don't like these terms, but I'll use it for shorthand quickly. And what struck me, Professor Dajani, is in a way, a lot of the anti-Semitism that you're facing in Palestinian society or in the Islamic world has really been imported by European thought, by missionaries, by colonialism. You refer to Luther and how it's a popular text in the region. The Muslim Brotherhood was inspired, I think, with quite importance with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It becomes an integral part of their philosophy and their ideology. And even later, as Rami and other scholars in our institute examines, also sorry, excuse me, sir. There's workers here. That even Nazism is brought into the discourse of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, Professor Dajani, to what extent is European colonial thought responsible, European Christianity, European fascism, responsible for the anti-Semitism that we are facing in the region? And how do we, by confronting this anti-Semitism, is this a pathway perhaps to more opportunities for a deeper reconciliation between Israelis, Jews, and Muslims and Christians who are from the region?
I think you might have muted yourself, Professor Dajani.
Professor Dajani, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
If you read the books that are being published with regard to anti-Semitism or Holocaust denial, you will see that the roots are in the other books that were imported from Europe, or that were viewed as the intellectualism of Europe. And so you will tend to find that, and to give you an example, one of the books that has been published in Europe was regarding the revenge that Jews did take place against the Germans. So somebody here just took that book and then translated it to Arabic and gave it a different version, making it his own adapted version of Jews persecuting Germans. So here, this is the influence, and this is the linkage. It is that people here are being under the influence, whether it is colonial or imperialist, or the background of whether it is Britain or France or European that were dominating the region. So they pick up the literature, translate it, and then make it more into anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, basically thinking as if this is part of defending the Palestinian cause. And so, or part of being pro-Palestine, or they see themselves when they are publishing such things as if they are being nationalist. And so this is part of the problem, where they see, if you are talking about, if you are bashing denials of the Holocaust, then they see it as if you are a collaborator, or you are being trying to soften things for the other. And that's part of the problem. And this is the linkage that I see between the cultural domination of the Europeans that is still very influential on the Arab world. And so a lot of what is being published in Europe, which is anti-Semitic, is being viewed here as if it is well researched, studied, and it is the truth that the Jews and the Zionists are trying to deny. And so it is, you are doing the right thing. They see themselves as if doing the right thing, standing up for a cause, standing up for the truth, when actually they are just propagating lies and innuendos and claims that are not documented. So this is part of the problem. And another thing is that people tend to read these things, so they tend to buy these books. People don't buy books that are pro-truth, pro the Holocaust, pro or attacking anti-Semitism, because they think of that as if it is collaborating with the other, or being the voice of the other, voice of the master. And this is part of the problem. But in reference to your second part, how to combat it, you combat it by making your voice heard, by challenging what they are doing. And it is very difficult, but for instance, we are challenging totally the hadith by the Prophet that on Judgment Day, Muslims and Jews will have a battle and Muslims will win the battle, and to say this is a fabricated hadith. And for the first time, we are making a voice to say this is fabricated, this is not true, this is anti-Quran, and it's not within the text of the Quran.
So, Dr. Dajani, how do you maintain, say, the integrity or the legitimate Palestinian cause, and at the same time try to eradicate this sort of it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like a catch-22. It's like, there's an ideological rut. How do you get rid of this vestige of European anti-Semitism and even Nazism and continue the legitimate struggle for your people?
By standing up.
Professor Dajani, you have to unmute yourself. Yep. There you go.
We are a voice that was not here. And so that's where I have started the Wasatia movement, basically to speak to the people in their own language, which was the Quranic language. And in this way, in reference to the Quran in everything we say, and this is one way to combat this anti-Jewish radicalism within religion, which is being promoted by people who were well paid, like Qaddawi, or who were Wahhabis, and by the Saudis who have printed the Quran, reprinted the Quran to give interpretations which are anti-Jewish. And so you are fighting against extreme odds, and but you need to stand up and make yourself heard, and that's what we are doing. In the beginning, it's one voice, and then it becomes two voices, and then it is three voices, and then becomes the majority.
So I said inshallah. And Rami, would you like to say something, and then we can take some questions from people?
Yeah, quickly, briefly, I agree with Professor Dajani completely about that. All what I mentioned here, it's related to the most radical wing in the Muslim people. They are Hassan al-Banna, Sayyid Qutb, Yusuf al-Qaradawi. So I'm not here talking about generally about the Muslim around the world that believe in these ideas, because that is impossible. So what I presented here is just related to the political Islam current and the Islamists. But those people have, unfortunately, they have money, they have power, they have some countries like Turkey, like Qatar supporting them, so they have succeeded to dominate the scene. People like Professor Dajani and other people call for moderation are suffering with those people because they have unequal facility. So I respect what Professor Dajani said, and I would like to make it clear what I have mentioned here related to radical wing in Islam, not the Muslim normal people. Thank you.
It's interesting. I want to integrate many people, but I think there's a long conversation here because I think the people that we're dealing with in the fight against anti-Semitism, I suspect are the same people that you're dealing in your fight as well. So it's interesting. We have Marav, who would like to ask a question. She's a master's student in Haifa University. Marav?
Hello. First of all, shukran jazilan to both of you for wonderful presentations. My question, please. Professor Dajani, if I captured you correctly, you've said that once I'm saying anti-Israel and anti-Semitic in one sentence, I'm losing my audience, and I assume that the notion of the government in Israel is thinking as well, because in Israel it hasn't been combated. The anti-Semitic, I can say as a citizen of Israel that it's even not the daily talk on the street. So my question is, who should combat it? Is it something that should come from scholars, from the government, from as a grassroots, from the community in Israel? Who should combat this? Because meanwhile, if me as a scholar not speaking about anti-Semitism and anti-Israel in one sentence, I'm making a dangerous for Israel getting their legitimated and boycotted. So who should combat it and how, please, if you both can relate?
We don't support the BDS because the BDS does not make distinction between the camps within Israel, which are pro-peace and anti-peace, moderates and extremists. Similar, within anti-Semitism, we don't support the idea that just being anti-Israel is being anti-Semitic, and we feel that there should be a distinction between Israeli policies that are pro-peace, pro-human rights, and policies which are not. And that's where this distinction needs to be done within the framework of the definition of anti-Zionism in order for the Arab world to become part of it, because you are weakening the term anti-Semitism. You are watering it down when it is when Israel is annexing part of the Palestinian territories, and then you are saying this is okay, this is fine. And so, and if you are against it or you criticize it, then it is anti-Semitic. You have to make that distinction. Otherwise, the term itself, anti-Semitism, will be watered down, and it will start to lose its effect, its impact, its value, its moral value. And that's where I think that it is very important to make that border or that line between what is anti-Israel and what is anti-Semitism. I don't know if I understood your question correctly, but I don't know if this was the answer.
Laura, that's good.
Yes, basically, just if I may ask one more time, who should make this distinction, this border? Who should talk about this? Who should make the activities, organization, campaigns of speaking it out loud? Is it the people from Israel, the regular people on the street? Is it scholars? Because it feels like the collar on the head of the Israeli is getting tightened, while he even doesn't know that. Because, as I said earlier, it's not a common conversation on the street speaking about anti-Semitism. From regular Israeli, there's no anti-Semitism. So who should combat it? Who should make this distinction in the border of speaking of the discussion between anti-Israeli and criticizing and between anti-Semitism? Who should combat it? In other words, who can save us? This is basically the other question.
Sorry, who can what?
Who can save us?
Who should do what?
Who should save us?
Who should save us? Well, we are trying to save the world. We are trying to save peace, and so, and for instance, we need to rather than be pro one side or pro the other, to be pro peace, to be pro human being, and this way, in being pro peace, pro reconciliation, we are being pro Israel, pro Jewish, pro Palestine, and so this is what we are doing. I mean, we are trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the other, and in this way, we are also trying to have the other put himself in our shoes. So in defining anti-Semitism, I would like a Jew to understand why is it that I would object to his definition that bashing Israel policies of occupation is not anti-Semitic to me. And so, and although I don't want to, I think that there is no comparison between the Holocaust and the Nakba, and they are totally different things. Yet, people should understand when a Palestinian tried to make that comparison, because out of ignorance, rather than attack him, but try to teach him, use education to teach people about what is anti-Semitism, what is the Holocaust, that's why we are focusing on education.
Professor Dajani, very briefly, I did a survey with Ed Kaplan at Yale University, and we interviewed 10,000 people in 10 European countries. And we asked them a series of questions that were very, we called Israel bashing, that Israel is an apartheid state, that the Israelis are poisoning Palestinian water, very extreme cases. And also we asked them questions that were classical forms of anti-Semitism. So this was in 10 European countries. And what we found was that those who criticize Israel are not necessarily anti-Semitic in the classical sense, but they were 13 times more likely. Israel bashers were 13 times more likely in Europe to be anti-Semitic in the classical sense. So the correlation is very strong, at least in Europe. What do you think of the IRA definition, which I think has, the demonization of Israel is anti-Semitism, or to blame Jewish people for Israeli policy is a form of anti-Semitism, but there's a limit. You can criticize Israel and not necessarily be anti-Semitic, but there's sort of a safeguard in this definition. What do you think of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism?
Like I said, when we say that demonization of Israel, it is anti-Semitic. But if you are talking about criticism of Israeli occupation, it's anti-Semitic. And same thing. What is the context, even in the comparison between the Nazis and the Israelis? And here, is it meant, what is the, in what context it is? Is it in a context in order to demonize Israel or to demonize Jews, or is it in a context that we have to stop this because it is immoral, or we have to stop, for instance, persecution, we have to stop repression, we have to end the occupation? So here, in order for us to understand, to make the distinction between what is anti-Semitic and what is not anti-Semitic. And for instance, often we will tend to find that people might try to be anti-Israel or say Israel is apartheid. We say Israel is not apartheid. Our problem with Israel is not apartheid. It is occupation. And the elephant in the room is the occupation. And so that's where we make it clear. That's why we do not support boycotts. We support dialogue. We do not support walls. We support bridges. And we have to understand, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the other. You have to listen to me as a Palestinian, try to understand what I'm saying. And I will listen to you as Israeli, as a settler, as a Jew, and try to put myself in your position and to see things how you see them. Because I think this dialogue is very important, since we can reach out and try to explain things, particularly with regard to Islam, with regard to how Islam views Jews, because it's not true that Islam is anti-Jewish. And it is a misperception that only through dialogue can it be explained.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you. Abdurrahim from Morocco would like to ask a question. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, Mr. Dajani. Nice to meet you for the third time, but this time is online. Hello, Mr. Rami Aziz. Thanks for your presentations. I just want to focus on a term used by Mr. Dajani, really used a lot by other actors. It is Arab Muslim, the term of Arab Muslim world. In my view, I think this term, we should overtake it because for me, it's a problem more than a solution. Because I prefer using the term of North Africa and Middle East more than this term, because historically the term of Arab world depends to nationalism, Arab nationalism, which is anti-Semitic, and the term of Muslim world is dependent of Islam, Muslim Brotherhood, especially. since the spring of 2011, we had a change in our region, especially in favor of multi identity. For example, in Morocco, in our constitution after the spring of 2011, we find the recognition of multi-identities in Morocco, not only Arab, but also Arab, Jewish, and Jewish, especially Jewish dimension. So I think this is, of course, it's not enough, but I think it's a good step. It's a good step for other countries to recognize the Jewish dimension of their identities, especially in North Africa. Here in our region, we have a lot of minorities, a lot of let's say multiple identity. We can talk, for example, about Berbers in North Africa, Amazigh people. We can talk about Egyptians, who talk now about the Egyptian identity, not Arabic identity. We can talk about Kurds, Ashur, a lot of minorities and multiple identities. I think if we take advantage of this multiculturalism, we can find especially it will be a part of solution. No, but if we focus or concentrate on the term of Arab, I think it will be a problem more than a solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdurrahim. And just before you respond to the question, I'd like to invite Shannon to ask a question or make a comment, and then I'll let Professor Dajani and Rami respond, and we're kind of running out of time. So Shannon, please feel free.
Okay, thanks. And thank you both for your presentations, very insightful. I had a question about, I'd say Professor Dajani particularly, and then Charles' follow-up was about the connection to European anti-Semitism. Have either of you studied more indigenous anti-Semitism within Arab, Persian, Muslim communities? Because it seems that there probably there's multiple types of anti-Semitism, obviously, that we're looking at this week. And so I wonder if either of you can speak to that. Secondarily, in terms of just criticizing Israel's policy, I think is one thing, but that doesn't mean we have to be anti-Israel, right? I mean, because there's some terminology that gets a little confusing, and bashing. I mean, I prefer not to bash anyone, any government. I mean, and of course, then you have to separate the people from the government itself, which I feel like these issues all get mixed together. And then the last thing was to Professor Dajani, in terms of comparing Israeli government to the Nazis. I think that's something that I guess I would suggest maybe that would be something to reconsider as a problem in terms of historical. As a historian myself, and studying the history and looking at it and looking at how helpful that is to even, I mean, that would be something I would want to combat in terms of where you're stepping in the other shoes and the great work that you're doing, because it's so personal to the Jewish community separately from the historical issues itself. So that's all. But I did have, the question was more the indigenous anti-Semitism, and then just a couple of comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Aziz, do you want to respond, and then Dr. Dajani will respond?
No, Professor Dajani has a beginning.
I will respond to the last part, the last two questions, and Aziz could respond to the first one, because the Persian thing is not my specialty. But first, we are not comparing Israel to Nazis. But what I'm saying is that there are those who do that comparison. Toynbee, in his book, was comparing the moral part, and he said it is not about the Holocaust as as such, but rather even if we are talking about one person, it is the moral issue he's talking about. So I'm not comparing at all, or I have no intention. On the contrary, I try to warn Palestinians not to compare and to avoid that that gap where that thing that where they do out of their own frustration, they try to compare, and as a result, we warn them against it. So but the thing is, if somebody within the Israeli extreme right is making statements which are outrageous, and then people try to compare such statements, not necessarily with Nazis, with any other right-wing leader, you cannot prevent that. And this is something, but we do not do it. I avoid this comparison. So it is not part of our lingo. It is not part of our rhetoric. On the contrary, we make a distinction between Israel as pro-peace and Israel as anti-peace. And in this way, we are trying to build a camp within Israel, to build bridges with the Israeli pro-peace camp. And because we do realize that without Israel and without the Israelis, we cannot have peace, and we cannot achieve even our own goals. We need their support to help us achieve our goals. So in this way, we are building bridges with them and making the distinction. Even we open dialogue with settlers, we open dialogue with right wing, we open dialogue with others. So they listen, that's fine. They don't listen, it's also okay. So I hope I did not, I make this very clear that there is no comparison, and we have no intention of such comparison. That's why we would like, and when people use the word Israel, always as if Israel is Judaism, as if Israel is all Jews, as if Israel is all Israelis, which is not true. And we try to explain that Israel does not mean there is one unity, there is one, and this is part of the Arab problem, that they look at Israel as if it is one unity. It is not. And that's why we try to reach out to those within Israel who are pro-peace, who are pro-reconciliation, and try to build bridges with them, because we realize that our future is the same.
Thank you. Rami?
Yeah. For Dr. Abdurrahim question, he is concerned. We are in the same group, and yesterday I listened to him. He wanted to say we shouldn't refer to the Arab, this group of countries from the Gulf to the ocean as Islamic world or Arab world, because there is a different identity inside this society. There is Egyptians, there is Lebanese, there is Moroccans, there is Tunisian. So we shouldn't combine all of them in one project. Like we said, we have Islamic project, because that is exactly what the Muslim brothers and political Islam's group are seeking for. They wanted to unify people based on religion to can easily drive them to their final destination is the Islamic Caliphate or Islamic State. He yesterday referred and mentioned one of the most wonderful example is about Arab nationalism during Nasser era. Nasser did the same, what the Islamist, the same project. He has Arab nationalism as equivalent to the political Islam project of Muslim brothers. So here we should to respect the diversity. We should respect the identity of each society, of each country, and we should respect the other. But in the current situation we have, when we call the Islamic world, the Arab world, we doesn't respect even the minorities inside these Arab countries or these Muslim countries. We can deal with them based on this case as a minority or between two petition. If you come from a radical Islam side, you will deal with minorities as a zimmi. Okay, so but the diversity or respect the identity of the other world is the key to solve a lot of problems we already have. Is that true, Dr. Abdurrahim? I understand you well.
Thank you. Thank you, Rami. So we're running low on time. I'll just say to Shannon, I appreciate the work of Bassam Tibi, who looks at the history of anti-Semitism in the region, and also, I think before colonial times and missionaries, he looks at indigenous anti-Semitism. He looks at, I think, discrimination against Jewish people, whereas anti-Semitism, he argues, is a European phenomenon. And I actually agree with him. I think anti-Semitism is a very specific form of hatred that comes out of Europe for all sorts of reasons. But there was discrimination, which is different than anti-Semitism. And in terms of Persian Jew hatred, David Menashri, who's an expert on Iranian studies, will be with us in the next session, and he'll address those issues much better than I can. So I think we'll end it here. We have a 50-minute break. And on behalf of everybody on the call, on behalf of ISGAP, Professor Dajani and Rami Aziz, thank you so much for your contributions to our discussions. You really enriched the level of our studies. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dajani. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Zaira. Thank you.